How long had I been playing? I I want to say it was only a few hours, but all the evidence was to the contrary. The time of night, the headache, the pain in my eyes from staring at the screen, and not least of all my parents. I was being incredibly quiet. I had turned off the volume, but somehow they sensed someone was in the living room. There I was, eyes glued to the screen, playing weird worms on my 280 game Playco console. My dad actually had to jostle me, shake my shoulder to get my attention. Right up until that moment, I thought I'd been completely alone in the room. I didn't hear him approach, didn't hear him ask what the hell I was doing at 5, 6 a.m., and I didn't hear him scolding when I didn't respond. Instead, despite the muted television set, all I heard was the blaring ruckus of the game system, a series of beeps and buzzes that were no longer coming from an external source. My brain lit up with each noise, and everything except the screen was awash in whirling kaleidoscopic hues. It was decided that I had a gaming addiction, probably the first diagnosis of this phenomena as well. I had been seeing a child psychologist by force since Nicholas had disappeared. I'd found myself envisioning the kidnapping in my own personal thoughts, just how everybody else insisted it happened. There was a large part of me that wanted to believe that, when faced with the choice between perverted child killer versus inexplicable bone horror, the mind tends to gravitate towards the former. I even told the psychologist about how I had spotted Nicholas in the Playco games, how I could control him, how I watched him die hundreds of times, and how I particularly didn't care. The results? Pills, naturally. Pills as colorful and as plentiful as the dizzying spots and streaks I'd see when playing my games. Oh, and I kept playing them, don't doubt that for a second. The console was taken away, hidden, re-hidden, but I'd always find it eventually. After a couple of screaming matches and full-on spanking, I learned to re-hide the thing exactly as I found it when a car pulled into the driveway. They could never bring themselves to break my heart by throwing it away or giving it to some other dumb kid though. That was their mistake. They attributed my behavior to the trauma and side effects of the medication based on whichever they had last tried to address. Stealing, lying, basically doing whatever I felt because it was fun. I had no more sadness, no more guilt, and after enough sessions of quiznap, I could feel my grip on happiness and fear loosening. Anger. I had plenty of anger, great heaping stockpiles of it. Everywhere those emotions had been, anger stepped in to courteously fill the position. I became enraged at the simplest things, even things that I myself had caused and things that were intended to fill me with joy. When Christmas came around and I was expected to open my presents in front of my parents, my cousins, and my aunt, I flipped out. There was nothing wrong, no flaw in the behavior or absence of presents I wanted. I was just pissed at the idea that anything new was occurring. They took away the presents, wrapped in shiny paper and bows and all that, took them away, and said I couldn't have them until I apologized. I never apologized, and I didn't need any of that shit because I knew where the console was hidden. My favorite game on the console was definitely Xeno 484. It took place somewhere called the Minus World, and featured a series of questions that affected gameplay in ways I wouldn't think possible. The basic setup was simple. At the center of the screen was a tiny ship, not unlike the game Asteroids, and all around was a sea of skull, bones, and so on. Shooting a giant skull would splinter it into 3 tiny skulls. Shooting one of those would splinter that into little bones. Each smaller object moved faster, spiraling around in this black, featureless abyss. Every so often, the faces would appear. Pixelated, stark white faces that looked remarkably like people I knew or had known. The first time it happened, I was startled to see my mother's emotional visage looping and turning around my little ship. Then it was my dad. Then the child psychologist I had been seeing. Then other kids and relatives. Shooting at them enough gradually peeled off the flesh from their faces, revealing first gristle, then muscle, then bone. If I removed enough of my loved one's flesh, they'd become regular giant skulls, and, well, you're familiar with that part already. Even though I was clearly guiding a little ship, each new turn was signaled by reminding me how many Nicholases I had left. Nicholas 2 of 3, Nicholas 3 of 3. Additionally, with every on-screen death, the identical death cry that was now slowly taking the properties of his actual voice. Now I'm realizing that I've completely forgotten to mention Oad. He does that sometimes, darts around in my memory, hides behind things. Sometimes I'm reminded of Oad simply because I hear the clattering of his bones and wonder what's in my head. I imagine this is what it would be like to have a tapeworm in your brain, but instead of feeding on what you eat, it's siphoning your thoughts and emotions. Oad. Xenopho 84 wasn't all random skulls and not so random faces. Every so often, if I was doing particularly well during a round, Oad himself would come in at some strange angle and, ribcage after ribcage following, would collide with my ship and end the turn. It seemed like there was no way to avoid him. If I moved the ship, no matter how quickly, he would simply alter his route and destroy me anyways. Then the explosion, the scream, and the question or statement between rounds. Most of the text was innocuous enough. Do you want to keep playing? And do you think you will win? Some of the more disturbing lines, back when I could feel disturbed, ranged from I hate you to Nicholas hates you and do you know how far you've gone? It was Oad who told me in that white blocked lettering to throw away the pills. He even told me where the console was going to be hitting next when my parents suspected I'd been getting at it. I will be in the attic. But yes, sometimes the questions or statements would change the game in strange ways. It once asked, what would you kill someone with? To which I answered, spoke, the word knife. In the next round, whirling machete-like blades had replaced the standard pixel-sized bullets my ship had fired. Using this method, I'd received power-ups like flamethrowers, bazookas, and even an ill-conceived request for a bigger ship. All that did was make the ship on screen easier to hit, and I could see Nicholas in the cockpit, clawing at the hatch desperately, his face only a few pixels in width, frozen in a black-eyed scream. I was getting better at the game. As days, weeks, and months passed, all I thought about was how to beat the game, how to progress to the next level, defeat any new threats, and what power-ups I could ask for that would benefit me the most. At the very end, I'd come to the realization that the Playco motto, the one that greeted me every time I powered up the console, actually did quite well to explain what was happening. Playco Inc. Dream real. Dream it, and it's real. The last time I played Xeno, the last time I played with the console at all, I came prepared and was ready to request the power-up that would help me win the game. It knew. I don't know how it did anything really, but it knew. Before the first round started, the screen stayed blank for the longest time, and blood-red block letters faded onto the screen. Say it. I could barely get another breath to talk. I knew that this was going to be the night. That icy silent night, right around the stroke of midnight, that was going to be the night I finally defeated Oad. The thought of outwitting him had thrilled me. The thought that he might whine or gasp or give some sort of sign of weakness was all I lived for in that moment. It had been a long time coming, and I was finally going to see what happened when I had the upper hand over this mysterious, otherworldly thing. I spoke the request quietly, almost a whisper. Take Oad out of the game. There. Every other request had been fulfilled, no matter how crazy, so this one should be no different. I would remove Oad from the game completely, and without him there to thwart my progressions, I could play forever. Nicholas and I could play forever. Forever. Just the two of us, with me guiding him and deciding his fate. It may not seem like something a good friend would do, but I wasn't Nicholas' friend anymore. I was his god. The screen faded to black once again. No text, no nothing. What's the matter? I asked. Not going to leave, Pansy? I asked for it. Now you have to do it. Fair is fair. The screen immediately changed to static. It was sudden, disconcerting break with my virtual reality that left me feeling like I'd been slapped across the face. Scratching. The sound of scratching. That's all I heard. scratching on glass. I approached the television, pressed my ear to the screen, and listened. Scratching, slow and sparse at first, then more and more fervent. It sounded like rats were just behind the screen, clamoring and clawing to get out. The screen shifted a bit. Just the screen, and the bulky television set remained perfectly still. I stepped back as, not unlike a car window, the screen slowly descended and revealed a vast expanse of nothingness just behind. All the while the violent mosaic of static played on the gradually descending glass. I knew what I had done wrong. I asked for OAD to leave the game, and my request had been fulfilled. Appearing from the void like some horrific moon emerging from an eclipse, the pointed, twisted skull face of OAD peered out of the television at me. Its empty eye sockets, at once, seeming both vengeful and sad. I'd never noticed the duality in the past, and perhaps only saw it now that I had lost most semblance of my own emotion. With the sound of an off-kilter roller coaster click-clacking along some non-existent track, OAD rocketed forward from the television, his innumerable sets of ribs snaking out behind the malignant head bone. I fell to the floor in complete shock, unable to gain control of my motor skills or my voice as OAD sped through midair, over my living corpse, and shattered the front window. As he burst forth into the open night sky, never again to darken my sight, I could only stare upwards at the series of ribs blurring past. Within each cage, a person. Only a face, only hands. Faces crying. Hands grasping the white bars of the grim cells. White, black, Asian, every race I knew or would come to know since. Every age from the smallest child to acne-ridden teenagers. In every ribcage a stolen child. To this day, I recount the tale with neither a feeling of dread, nor fear, nor shame. I do not feel sad for them, I do not feel bad for myself, and I do not feel sorry for burdening you with this knowledge. I don't feel anything anymore. I'm not even angry. I don't even remember what angry feels like. Maybe I could feel something, anything. I'd be able to figure out why one image still haunts me to this day. The mental picture of Nicholas's face, enclosed within ribs, peering out at me with dread, as if I was the monster.
That's right. Pay attention. Check it. I'm the one that you should pray to, cause when it's your time to go, I might be the one who takes you. I won't let shit ride, what for? If I knew I were to die tomorrow, I wouldn't give you a minute more. Should you live or die, I choose. But can you stand the kill twice? I'll keep you alive for deja vu. We can seize do your lines. Write the almighty arrogant 666 times. In LA, now we snatching them. Have your crew enter, they'll leave with their heads handed back to them. Run game, you won't gain, don't talk.